Hello everybody, good morning and welcome to Live at the Waterhole, where first up, surprise, surprise, we're at the Jamala Waterhole in the Madikwe Game Reserve of the Northwest Province of South Africa, and it's another elephant festival. Well, my name is Ralph Kirsten, and what does the bush hold in store for us today? Well, you'll have to sit back, relax, and watch what happens around all the different water holes. And as per usual, please don't forget that this is a live and interactive experience, so we'd love for you to jump on board with us and send us through your questions and your comments. You can do that by going on the WildEarth website and registering. You can also join the conversation on X, formerly known as Twitter. You can use the hashtag WildEarth. Also, on the YouTube live chat, what is it that you'd like to see, talk about, whatever it is, send it through. We'd love to hear from you. So lots of bulls, but there's also a splattering of breeding herds with youngsters as well. And we've been seeing this for the last week or so with this amount of elephants, sometimes a bit more, sometimes a bit less, but they've been spending a lot of time here in this latter part of the morning and into the afternoon, as it's been very, very hot. I think today is cooling down a little bit in comparison to the heat waves that we were experiencing, but I think it's still very hot and indicative with all the ellies coming through at this time. And speaking of the heat, I think it's time to go and have a look what the weather's going to be like across all the different locations. So a bit of a mixed bag, but still relatively hot all round. And it seems there might be a splattering of rain here in Madikwe today as well. So that will be nice. It will cool things off, and it will also supply the moisture required for the bush to start growing at this time of the year. I see a couple of them really enjoying the water. One on the right there, submersing itself completely. A few kicking up the mud. Some are drinking at the fresh point here, almost closest to us, a little bit off center to the left. That's where the fresh water comes out. Sometimes, just so that you know, you may hear some human activity or voices. This is at the Jamala Lodge, and there's a viewing platform just underneath this camera. So you may hear some voices at some stage, but that's just the guests on site enjoying this experience with us. So, and it's always interesting just to watch the dynamics between the elephant individuals, between the bulls and the youngsters of the breeding herds, and what happens between all of them. They are so intelligent and a very highly sort of developed social structure. So it's always interesting. See that group on the opposite side, the breeding herd, they seem to have been leaving, but now they've all gone dead still, almost like they're discussing maybe which route they'll be taking, where they're going to be going, etc., as they leave this waterhole. So in the cloud cover, making it a little bit grayer than usual, but I think at least for the animals, it's quite a bit cooler than it has been. It's been upper 30s into the 40s, and I think today lower 30s. So still hot, but at least cooler than it has been. couple of buffalo there, also just lying up under the shade of that acacia or vachillia. I think it's probably sweet thorns, these. Just ruminating and chewing the cud, as we call it. So very different digestive systems do the elephants have in comparison to buffalo, where the elephants need to almost constantly feed, although when it's very hot like this, they take that time to cool off and replenish their thirst, but then off they need to go and constantly get in those calories to support those massive bodies of theirs and being mega herbivores. With the buffalo, it's their digestive system is a little bit more efficient, but they do need to spend time ruminating as they're doing now. So Ella, yeah, that's thanks for your comment. It's one of those things you almost always see buffalo ruminating, and it's quite a process. The advantage of being a ruminant is that you can sort of bite off your food and move off and digest it at a later stage, and you don't need to spend as much time literally collecting the food and picking it off. But like you say, more time spent grinding the food down. And as a result, very strong jaws as well as very big molar teeth to grind the food down. A nice few youngsters here. They might get involved in a bit of splishy splash. That's what we want to see. Let the playtime begin. You can see those ones that have come in, quite a different color to the waterhole here and a lot of the other elephants. They would have been dust bathing, more of a reddish soil, a bit away from the waterhole. That's what's turned them brown. But you'll see here, as they start spraying themselves with water, they literally change color before our eyes. Belinda, yeah, always interesting to see elephants in their different colored coats. Whichever place they are in, whichever environment they find themselves in, they'll generally take on the color of the dirt. So you can have elephants in different game reserves literally taking on completely different colors. You see here a lot of this grayness of the clay that we're experiencing inside this waterhole itself. But then away from that, it's a lot more iron oxide, I think, in the soil that's making it red. And then that's what they cover themselves with. If we see the elephants in Okokoyo, in Etosha, they take on a very white color. Obviously, when they go in the water, though, they return to their natural gray.
Eco Training's professional field guide course can make your dreams a reality. This comprehensive program comprises 5 months of theoretical and practical training in the African bush with highly qualified instructors in multiple locations. Enroll today and receive 5,000 Rand off using the promo code. If you've just finished school or tertiary education and you want to head into the wild, Eco Training's professional field guide course is for you.
So, and also, if you were wondering, and if you didn't know, elephants, the trunk is an extension of their nose. So they don't need to have their mouths out of the water to be able to breathe. Just literally the end or the tip of their trunk. So very often you'll see even the little youngsters, they roll themselves completely underwater. They can hold their breath as well. So sometimes they're under entirely, but then you'll see or notice that the trunk just pokes out and they can take a breath of air. Oh, that youngster on the opposite bank, just slippy slidey, trying to get out. There he goes. Well done, buddy. So you see, I think these breeding herds, they've had a bit of a wallow and a play in the mud. That youngster now just on the left there, getting stuck and sliding around. But I think they're making inroads to try and come across and have a drink. But these bulls are dominating this drinking site. So there might be a little bit of sort of pushing and shoving as they try to get in. It depends on how thirsty they are. It'll be interesting to watch what happens now. Catherine, thanks for your comment. And it is indeed, isn't it? It's always amazing watching elephants, especially when there's so many of them, and you almost just don't know where to look. There's elephants hanging around far in the background there, one youngster running up the road, and then off on the left is quite a big tree there. And then I think yesterday we had a closer look, and I was thinking that it may be a leadwood or Combretum imberbe. And they go and hang out under the shade. And then these breeding herds here in the foreground, really wanting to come in for a drink, I think. As they move off onto the left, that's also a site where they often go and eat the dirt. Seems like there's a lot of mineral salts there, probably as a result of evaporation from this sort of bigger area. And that then is called geophagia, where they get their supplements. Warthog making its way in now, just on the opposite bank, sneaking a quick drink. And warthogs are also traditional wallowers, so he may try and have a wallow, but with the activity of the elephants, we found that most of the animals haven't got much time before they get chased off. They're another lover of the mud. Them, the elephants, buffalo, and rhino in general, all the real wallowers. They'll come down, lie in the mud, roll around in it. The elephants are more like swimmers. They're just really cooling off, not so much wallowers, as in lying in the mud for extended periods, like those other three species. So in warthogs being bulk grazers, very similar to zebra. So they're all in the same sort of department in terms of their digestive process. The warthogs, the zebra, the elephants, whereas when you look at most of the other animals, they're more of the ruminants, as in the buffalo and the kudu and all the rest. And this is also another classic example of a keystone species, and as elephants are, engineers of their environment, and they're really changing this waterhole. I mean, firstly, they've taken out a lot of water. They've changed the shape of it, and with the soluble mud in the water itself, they have a real big effect on the environment and being engineers of it in total. So it's really interesting when you think of it that way as well. So, Millie, if I'm not mistaken, what I've seen is that the water is constantly trickling out. So, when there's not that much activity here, it fills up. But over the last week, as I've said, we've been experiencing a heat wave. So, it's been getting up upper 30s, lower 40s, and sometimes even higher into the mid 40s. So, obviously the elephants have they've had a huge impact on this waterhole, and yeah, if it had to continue, they may need to up the input of the water. But it seems like we're sort of at the back end of the heat wave now, and maybe it will start cooling off a bit. Hopefully there'll be a bit of rain as well. That will help top it up. But as long as the activity subsides a little bit, then the waterhole should fill up. Looks like this breeding herd is still pushing forward, slowly but surely, trying to get in amongst these bulls and get a nice drink. And there, that individual on the right, flat out in the water. Wonderful. So, just a little bit of news also in terms of elephants at large. There's been another set of twins born we do know that elephants can give birth to twins. It's quite rare, very rare in my experience. I've never seen it in person. But there's been a couple of occasions, and most recently, just a few days ago, there were two baby elephant calves, twins, both females, born to a mother elephant named Alto in Kenya's Samburu National Reserve. So that's very interesting, and that was announced by Save the Elephants. So interesting if you want to check that out. That youngster on the opposite bank is out the water at one of the special scratching posts. Looks like a perfect height to scratch its bum. And almost as if he heard us talking about him, he's stopped as soon as we've gone in to have a closer look. That's a favoured site, but also over on the right. They seem to love that over the tree that's fallen over on the right-hand side there with that lovely branch that's sticking up there as well.
Attention all teachers. Round up your bundles of joy and get comfortable because WildEarth Kids Safaris are here to stay. Go to our website and sign your class up for a special virtual safari with interactive learning tailored for kids.
Good afternoon or good morning, boys and girls from all over the world.
Spoil your kids with some wild fun for 1 hour every weekday on our afternoon drives. WildEarth, it's in your nature.
So as we've said before, as we're watching these animals, you might notice that the breeding herds, they come in, they do their thing rather quickly. They get wet, they try and have a drink, they have a bit of fun, and then they seem to move off. And they don't have as much time to hang around as the bulls do. So on some days, we've seen pretty much throughout the entire show, the bulls just hanging around here. Even as the breeding herds come and go, those bulls remain. And we might see the same happening now. So Picasso, nice question around infertility in elephants. And yes, I know that it does occur, but that's a great subject for me to delve into. So I'll do a bit of research and we'll find out. I know that there's been some issues in different parts. It's normally to do with stress, and then that normally, and it's resource based usually. So like with the desert elephants, there have been periods when there's been infertility. There's also been a high mortality rate of the calves for whatever reason. It's normally when there's drought periods. But maybe there's a bit more to it. So I'll look into a bit of the research and let's see what we can find. So, Caitlin, thanks for your comment, and I must agree with you. They are very, very special indeed. And I've just been doing a little bit of research on the infertility of elephants, or the occurrence of it. And as per usual, it seems that the most infertile elephants, it occurs in captivity, in zoos mainly, and it's normally when they become a bit obese as a result of rich feed and lack of exercise, and then they seem to have infertility there. But there's not too much else. So it's a really interesting topic. I know it does occur, and it would always be that kind of resource-based and around stress, etc. So stress in animals in captivity is naturally high. And then stressed as a result of potential poaching and fleeing for their lives, with human-wildlife conflict, as well as I spoke of, during drought periods when the resources are very low. And we also know that there has been abortions and death of youngsters, and that's generally also resource-based at the time of giving birth and after, and during pregnancy. But generally, we would say that female elephants in a healthy environment, which has got everything that they need, they can remain fertile and up until the time that they die. So they can literally continue giving birth all the way through, and so that's quite interesting as well. So I found one reason behind infertility in elephants in the wild, and that's on Science Direct. They say that hypoprolactinemia is an endocrine disorder associated with infertility in many species, including elephants, and that can lead to infertility in the females. I love watching these guys play, and when the bulls go at each other, there's normally the one that starts to assert dominance, and then the other, they generally have this real Michael Jackson moonwalk, and they're backing off from the other, but keeping their face towards the opponent. And they can keep reversing for quite some time. It's nice to have the youngsters around because the bigger, older bulls, they're not so playful and not so much fun to watch. They're still amazing, but not as active as those youngsters.
Hickory dickory dock, the kids ran to the spot. The clock struck 4, the kids sat down, hickory dickory dock. Our kids safaris bring interactive entertainment and learning to the future protectors of our world. for 1 hour every weekday during our safari drives. Watch it live on your nearest device. Don't miss out on the fun. WildEarth, it's in your nature.
So, quoted directly from the Madikwe Game Reserve website, and speaking of the topography of Madikwe, because we can see those lovely mountains in the background, the diverse topography of Madikwe, ranging from the jumbled hills of Chweni and the stark contrast of the hills abruptly rising from the otherwise flat northwestern plains to the prominent ridge of the Dwarsberg, is ultimately due to the underlying geology of the area. The scenery we observe in Madikwe today is the result of billions of years of geological processes that are carrying on to this day, ensuring in 20 million years' time, Madikwe will look different to what it does now. The Dwarsberg forms an Afrikaans for the Acrossberg, yes, as a result of the name, or because it's called like that, the southern boundary of Madikwe Game Reserve, and it runs from east to west, so it's literally across the reserve. This range has been drastically eroded, with Brandwacht, the highest point, reaching only 1,228 meters. Northwards into Madikwe, an undulating plateau covered in dense bushveld vegetation suddenly drops away at the Tweede Poort escarpment to a lower flat savanna plain. Scattered inselbergs dot the savanna, bringing relief to an otherwise flat area. The Chweni hills, more or less in the center of the reserve, reach 1,328 meters, making this the highest point in Madikwe. The Molatedi Gate on the eastern boundary is close to Lotteringskop, and the entrance gate on the western side has a good view of Abiaterskop. So lots of Afrikaans names in there, and most of the mountains and the features being named in Afrikaans. So Poo-2, that is the ridge along the elephant's back. It's obviously bone and part of the vertebra. So that is skeletal, yeah, and running down their back, right down into their tail, and all the way to the end as well. So from their shoulders, you can see that line running all the way down, and then through and into the tail, right till the end. It's nice to see an elephant with its trunk on the ground like that. They do say that they do this in rest, but they can also do that to pick up vibrations in the ground in a way that they communicate with each other as well, mainly over very long distances. But I think in this instance, it's more likely that it's just having a rest. So, and I have spoken on this before, but just some information on Madikwe at large, but because I think it's definitely worth revisiting. In terms of the wildlife, the process of reintroducing wildlife to this area began in 1992 under the code name Operation Phoenix, which relocated entire breeding herds of elephant, Cape buffalo, South Central black rhino, and southern white rhino, along with various species of antelope. And following Operation Phoenix, which was one of the biggest movements of wildlife ever undertaken, Madikwe has also successfully reintroduced predatory species such as lions, cheetah, spotted hyena, and wild dogs, bringing the total large mammal population of the reserve to over 10,000. And there's currently more than 60 species of mammals in the park. Madikwe has been regarded as one of the better conservation areas in Africa, offering all the major species, including lion, leopard, elephant, buffalo, both black and white rhino, along with almost all the plain antelope species. A special feature of Madikwe lies in its unique location, a transition zone on the edge of the Kalahari, where a number of rare species occur naturally, and the bushveld. Climate is generally mild to hot, but winter nights can be cold. Over 350 species of birds have been recorded, and the reserve is relatively close to the Pilanesberg National Park, and there's a long-term plan to develop a corridor between the two parks, and also assist in and alleviate the overpopulations, particularly for elephant in the Madikwe Game Reserve. That is still sort of under negotiation, and it does seem that there's a few minds that have probably put pay to that idea of the corridors going through. So that's where I think the biggest conflict with humans and wildlife comes in, is where economically, and it all comes down to money. So, for instance, with these mines that are probably the roadblock for this corridor going between Pilansberg and Madikwe, if we could make more money from the wildlife and create more employment and jobs for the locals than the mines do, uh, then it would be a no-brainer and it would happen very quickly. But because those mines obviously create a lot of employment, and there's a lot of economic input and lots of money to throw around, it makes it very difficult. But this is the problem with wildlife and human conflict right across the board. And I always go back to what we learned in my first year of conservation, was that if it pays, it stays. But sometimes we need to make it pay a lot, or to stop the kinds of practices of mining, etc., as that obviously also brings in a lot more than the wildlife necessarily would. So another little breeding herd come to join on the opposite bank, and the youngsters, as per usual, getting stuck in. Is that a few bulls arriving on the top right? Looks like as well. So they'll also join the party. So Joanna, yeah, I'm glad you're excited about the elephants on their way in as well. And as I say, there's a real ebb and flow. You have periods when it's just jam packed, and then it does empty out a bit, but then you don't have to wait long and it fills up again. So here they come. So you see this bull, I think he's the reason that this breeding herd has now decided to just get out the way. There's a couple of little youngsters, and the females will be concerned about them, especially when they're being pursued by a big old bull.
Cheetahs are one of nature's prolific gems. Jump on safari as we celebrate International Cheetah Day. Alongside an interview with the woman who established International Cheetah Day, Dr. Laurie Marker, we will search for cheetahs live across Africa and share some of our best cheetah sightings from over the years. Join us for our cheetah chase. WildEarth, keeping up with the fastest land mammal on Earth.
So the clouds do seem to be thinning a little bit as there's more sun coming through now, but probably as I say that, it's going to darken up a little bit again. It's rather patchy clouds. I don't see any rain just yet. So they have all seemingly concentrated on that side. I'm not sure what that's all about. It seems to have started off when the bull came over to them, and now it looks like that little youngster's having a lovely scratch. And some of the others are doing now too. This one in the front just scratching its foot against that little stump. But I definitely think the one to watch is that the little one, not the tiny little baby, which is also fantastic to see, but the other one is having a real go at that stump. Now, I've come across a lovely article on Africa Geographic. It says that just over 3 decades ago, a tract of land stretched across the corner of the northwest province of South Africa, a brown and dusty mosaic of degraded cattle farms devoid of almost all life. The transformation of this landscape to today's thriving Madikwe Game Reserve, though not without its challenges, is one of South Africa's conservation success stories. And the story of Madikwe Game Reserve is one that runs counter to that of most protected wild spaces in that its beauty and biodiversity potential were realized only after the fact. The decision to proclaim the reserve was made for socio-economic reasons, a conscious conclusion that ecotourism would bring more value to the community than farming. And so conservationists were faced with a vastly different task. Rather than protecting what was already there, they had to restore what once was. The result is a thriving conservation model that has worked to benefit not only wildlife, but the local communities as well, while providing one of the premier safari destinations in South Africa. By the latter part of the 20th century, it became clear that poor farming practices combined with an arid climate and degraded soils had made the area almost entirely unsuitable for either crop or livestock farming. Faced with decisions as to what to do with the land, the Settlement Planning Services of the Government of South Africa commissioned and conducted a comprehensive study into the most efficient form of land use and how it could be used to benefit the communities of the area. They concluded that wildlife-based ecotourism would be the most economically sound use of the land. In many ways, this practical and financial conclusion came to underlie the fundamental tenet that has made the Madikwe model so unique and successful, which is people first. To continue on that idea, there's no doubt that the colonial snatch and grab approach has played a significant role in the history of many protected areas throughout Africa, and as a result, the needs and opinions of local communities surrounding them have been sorely neglected or ignored. In many cases, wildlife reserves and national parks have prospered without their immediate neighbors benefiting in any way. As a general rule, the mere existence of these people near or amongst wild animals has been viewed as working in opposition to the overall goals of conservation, to the extent that keeping local people and wildlife separated was seen as essential to ensuring the survival of biodiversity. A gradual shift in mindset has resulted in a growing awareness that the fortunes of both protected areas and their human populations are irrevocably linked. In the case of Madikwe, somewhat unusually, this value system was inculcated from the start. It's actually quite similar to what happened, or what is ongoing in Kenya and in the Masai Mara. So upon its inception, Madikwe Game Reserve was described as a partnership between 3 main stakeholders: Northwest Parks and Tourism Board, initially the Bophuthatswana Parks Board, the private sector, together with local communities. And the underlying strategy is that local communities should benefit through employment, business opportunities, and a share of the game reserve profits that should be directed at community development projects. So, and then obviously we had Operation Phoenix, which was this reintroduction of all the wildlife, obviously the rehabilitation of the vegetation and the soil as well. The success of the Operation Phoenix is seen in Madikwe's thriving wildlife population. The reserve now supports the second largest elephant population in the country. The magic of Madikwe lies in its variety of available ecosystems and its prime position between the Kalahari and low-veld habitats. For visitors to the reserve, the safari is about more than merely seeing the big five. Painted wolves or wild dogs, cheetah, brown hyena, sable, tsessebe are all significant draw cards that keep visitors returning year after year. And despite a series of natural challenges, including a rabies outbreak, Madikwe's painted wolf population has thrived since their introduction in 1994, and the region is renowned for spoiling excited tourists to spectacular sightings of these energetic and endangered predators. And for me, that is the biggest draw card, is the wild dogs. And so we've seen them a couple of times on the show. There was one even live kill, I think it was at Rosie's Pan, with Liam, I do believe. So if we keep watching, we may be lucky as well. I had 5 young males here at Jamala. They spent a few hours here. They got chased off by a herd of elephants, and then they merely jogged back again after the elephants had left. And they spent most of the day here. So it was quite nice to see. It was probably a breakaway group, but who knows? I just think with the amount of activity from the elephants, though, and the heat, I don't think we're going to be seeing too many predators, but you never do know. See this bull here, just probing the end of his tusk. He's really having a good feel there. I wonder if he's maybe hurt it a little bit, or if he was just checking on it. Once again, all sorts going on. You don't know where to look. But glad to see the zebra and the wildebeest now coming in for a drink of the nice muddied water, though. But water's water, I suppose. So, Matt's mum, that's a wonderful question. It takes a lot of resources, both human and vehicles. They need big trucks, and they would obviously, with bulls, you can put one bull on a truck and you can move him. With the herds, you don't want to be splitting them up, so they literally need to have a convoy of trucks, and capture them as well as and then move them together and release them all at the same time. So it's not easy. Luckily, the distances were not too far. I think a lot of them came from the Kruger and maybe even some from Pilansberg. So they had sort of those stops. And then they would go into quarantine bomas, and they would firstly acclimatize, and they check that the animals are all, healthy after the move, etc., and the stress thereof. So they might even supplement feed them at that stage. And once they're sure that everybody's strong, fit, healthy, then they'll release them. So that's what's generally done. And it's not done with all the different animals. Sometimes hot release, depending on where they've come from. If it's a very similar environment or from a local game reserve or nearby, then they can just release them immediately. So then, they pretty much acclimatized to the area already. It does become a lot more difficult and expensive when you're going to be moving them large distances. So, yeah, that's the trouble with elephants, especially when they start to overpopulate. You'd rather that their population is controlled internally by, naturally balanced. But like we've spoken as well about the immunocontraception that they're starting to use now, that just stops the females from actually what is the term? They're still fertile, but there's no fertilization that goes on because I think it's the P53 gene assists in sort of terminating the birth before it even goes into term. So it's probably the most humane way of doing it. And any females that then are already pregnant, they'll go to full term, but then they won't have another baby after that. And yeah, it's just this contraception is one way or one angle or one technique. Culling is another that we used to employ in the past, but we sort of moved away from that now. It doesn't really happen anymore. So yeah, once the populations get big, then you do need to sort of step in. Otherwise, it's going to become a problem for the entire ecosystem and the reserve at large. You might have massive die-offs if you allow the population to expand too much. So it's a system that's constantly in flux. And as conservation management, we need to bear that in mind and also be in flux and move with the times. And I think they've done that with, through technology and research. And we always try to find the most humane way that doesn't disrupt any or the systems within the reserve. But it's difficult to tell sometimes because you might make a change. You can't really see into the future. And some of the results only come 10, 20, 50 years later. And when you find out actually it was the wrong move. So it's really important to, use the skills and the knowledge available to make the best decision. But moving elephants is probably one of the most challenging things that conservation teams would have to do. It's not easy at all.
It's a festive Wilderland. Come along as we go in search for various festive wild animals for the 12 days of Christmas. From honking geese and roaring lions to hooting owls and leaping leopards. Tune in on your nearest device and join the festive fun. Watch the live show from the 14th to the 25th of December. Don't miss out. Embrace the festive season with WildEarth.
So it looks like the bulls' meeting place is moved off over onto the left there, more around the mud than the drinking water. Looks like flat out conversations continuing. So don't forget also that at 12 o'clock we'll also have access to all of the AfriCam water holes. So as per usual, we generally stay where there's the most action. And here at Jamala, well, we could definitely say there's nowhere else that has this much activity. But if there's anything special anywhere else, we will definitely pop across there. But that's just in case you're wondering why we're just staying here. But from 12, we'll then also be going over to the different AfriCam waterholes. Activity will drive where we go. Or anything special, if there's something unique or a little bird or something that we'd like to have a look at, we'll also do that and just try and change it up a bit. But what you can expect, around this time of the day is mainly elephant activity, particularly when it is very hot. They sort of dominate these water holes. And we had the question yesterday why or which animals are affected by the heat the most. And in the one sighting we had was a hippo in the water with the elephants all trying to cool off as well. And they're probably the two that struggle the most to thermoregulate. And hence why hippos remain in the water during the day when it's hot and then come out at night when it's cooler. And elephants, when it's very hot, you see them doing exactly what we have been seeing over the last week, which is spending their time cooling off, as opposed to sort of just trying to flap your ears and stand in the shade. If you can get yourself covered in water and mud, it really assists in that thermoregulation process. So, EXO, elephants can walk in excess of 50 kilometers a day. So, it all depends where their preferred feeding grounds are. And if the water is far from that. Here in Madikwe, they've got decent feed now. It's starting to all come back, so they don't have to travel too far. And there is a decent amount of water as well. So they won't be going too far, I would imagine. But they may want to move up. They may have smelt that there's a female that has potential for mating with. And so bulls may sort of move further distances. But the breeding herds will just sort of move between the water and the feed. The bulls will do the same, but then they'll also travel larger distances to go and seek out females. And this youngster having a good old bum scratch there on the rocks. They've got very, very thick skin, the elephants. It's almost, I've seen it up close, and it's probably about 1.5 inches thick. So just imagine how difficult that is then. I think the feeling, they really need to get stuck into scratching posts for them to be able to feel it. And when they do, you can see the utter joy that they have in it. So it's just an understanding of how thick their skin is. And with such thick skin, they can literally walk through the bush with massive thorns. And it just, being in the presence of that, you hear it scrape on their skin, but it doesn't do anything to them. So much so that they even eat thorns. They put those massive acacia thorns in their mouth and they just crunch it up. They also eat prickly pears and the likes of cactus, which is exotic, but we do find it in some of the reserves, like in the Eastern Cape, and they absolutely love prickly pears. But they eat them thorns and all. And I made the mistake when I first moved down to the Eastern Cape and I was training trails rangers. I was showing them some dung, etc., and I picked up a ball of elephant dung, going through it, chatting with the local trails potential guides, and my hands were full of thorns, which I'd never experienced because generally the big acacia thorns obviously get crunched up, and you can see them as well sometimes in the dung, but never those fine hair-like thorns that you get on prickly pears. Which there is a lot of down in the Eastern Cape. So it was the first and last time that I've really picked up elephant dung in the Eastern Cape and gone through it like that, because I was picking those thorns out of my hand for the next week or so.
Attention all teachers. Round up your bundles of joy and get comfortable because WildEarth Kids Safaris are here to stay. Go to our website and sign your class up for a special virtual safari with interactive learning tailored for kids.
Good afternoon or good morning, boys and girls from all over the world.
Spoil your kids with some wild fun for 1 hour every weekday on our afternoon drives. WildEarth, it's in your nature.
So you can also notice that the activity of the elephants has slowed a little bit. Everybody's sort of just hanging about. There's a little bit of spraying still going on, not a hell of a lot. So I think they're just maintaining here at the waterhole, keeping cool, maybe have another spray before they move off. But it's mainly the bulls that are doing this and hanging about. Nice big bull coming over here, and a bit of interaction of these two saying hello. And you see, it's normally the more subordinate one that will put its trunk in the dominant bull's mouth, not vice versa. So I think this one that's a bit more wet and closer to us is less dominant than that one that's drinking now. And you see a very well-walked path on the opposite bank there that one individual is walking out on. Elephants generally make these kind of roads, these highways, and you can notice that when you are walking in the bush, if it's just a general game path or if it's an elephant path, it's a little bit wider, as you would imagine. So it's just about time for us to introduce the Africam waterholes, and then we'll be switching across to some of them. And I think first up we may go to Africam Naledi Dam, but we'll see what happens in the little bit of time we have before we go there. But what a wonderful morning it's been here at Jamala, once again with this elephant festival. I've thoroughly enjoyed it, and I hope you have too.